Hello, say Charat. Are you in debt? Do you owe money to banks, loan sharks, maybe even your family and friends? Today's conversation is aimed at people that are in debt, that took different types of credit agreements, and now want to know how to organize their money better. It is important to know how to build a financial plan. Without a plan, we make bad financial choices. We might try to pay off our debt, but at the end, it always piles back up. So, even if you don't earn much, it is possible to pay off your debt. However, without a smart strategy, you run the risk of wasting your time, energy, and sometimes even more money. With this being the case, I'd like to show you a basically flawless 9-step strategy to help you pay off your debt and make sure you never end up in the same situation again. Before looking at the 9 steps, it is important to understand exactly why you are in debt. People get into debt when they spend more money than they earn, and this usually happens when they take on credit that they can't afford to. For example, you might want to buy something that costs $1,000, but you don't have that kind of money today. You are offered a deal in which you pay, for example, $100 today, and the rest is being spread across 11 installments. This might seem like a good deal, but at the end of the day, this credit contract, you have paid $1,200 for something that originally would cost you $1,000. The extra $200 serves as kind of an interest because the company is lending money to you. At the start of the contract, that is not much of a problem. The true problem is that when we get this debt that starts to build up and grow out of control, we have this snowball effect. You might have already seen how compound interest can work on your favor when you are consistently investing your money on a monthly basis. For example, if you invest $1,000 and you have an extra $100 every month, at an interest rate of 1% a month, in 10 years' time, you're going to have $26,000. That is because compound interest can work in your favor as an investor. If you are surprised by these numbers, just imagine how much you would be surprised to see what happens when the interest rate works against people who are in debt. Although investments yield on average between 0.5% and 1% a month, interest rates on credit cards, for example, can reach in something like 12% a month, depending on the country, depending on the type of a card. In other words, a loan of $100 on a credit card with an interest rate of 10% a month could leave somebody with more than $300 in debt by the end of the year. This is 3 times more, triple the value of the loan in just a year. It is not by chance that debt is one of the biggest problems that stresses people out today in our current society. That can cause so many problems in one person's life, such as their career, their health, and also their relationships. If you want to avoid this kind of stress, keep paying attention so you can see how you can get rid of that in 9 simple steps. And step number 1 is to adapt your budget to help you out of that. To get out of that, the first thing to do is to make a financial plan. And this plan should begin by focusing on your household budget. For example, let's say that 50% of your budget goes towards your rent and another 10% goes toward each one of these areas: education, entertainment, charitable donations, investments, and some long-term expenditure. This would be a good budget if you wouldn't be in debt. However, as long as you're in debt, the distribution of your budget should be modified so that you can pay off your debt as quickly as possible. Firstly, highlight the debt in your budget so that you can get rid without implicating your standard of living too much. For example, you could keep the 50% of your budget devoted to paying your normal rent, your normal bills, but you can also keep 10% of your budget to education, as long as it's something that cannot be reimbursed. For example, extra courses. But the other 50% that is left over in our example should be used towards paying off your debt. It can be difficult, but it can be done. If you are in debt, it doesn't make sense to be spending your money on entertainment, on charitable donations, investing, or even long-term expenditures. This does not mean that you cannot enjoy yourself, you cannot give back to your community. You just have to be more creative in finding ways to enjoy yourself and to contribute to your society, to your community without spending money. It also does not make sense to be investing your money, 10% of your budget every month, because with the interest rates of your investments, you'll see that your debt is going to be much bigger. Don't try to save money while you're off paying your debt. One of the main mistakes people make is to try saving their money while they're also trying to pay off their debt. It is common to see people that keep putting money into low risk and low return investments and at the same time they have a lot of debt with a lot of high interests. It does not make sense to keep paying these high interest rates if you have money available. What is worse is when people get this money available and get very little return on their investments. Why do people behave in such an irrational way? It's because they have low level of financial education. Stop your debt from snowballing out of control. As a snowball rolls down the side of a mountain, it increases in size and becomes more and more uncontrollable. If you're not careful, the same thing can happen with your debt because of the high interest rates. And this means that the best thing to do first is stop the snowball in its tracks. When you are in debt, it is important to take the old age advice of spending less than you earn very seriously. The difference that you can save can be used to stop your debt from growing. Have a personal review. Are you financially prepared to have a credit card? If you don't know how to control your money, it might be best that you cancel your credit card. For some people, it might be even best to use cash to pay for everything and to divide the money up into different envelopes so they can pay on rent, transport, food, and other essential expenses. Any money going towards expenses that are not absolutely essential should be used towards paying off your debt. Step number 2, make a list of all your debt. The second step to paying off your debt is quite simple. You should make a spreadsheet and list all your debt, including the following details. Number 1, how you got into the debt. Number 2, who you owe the debt to. Number 3, the monthly interest rates on the debt. Number 4, if the possibility of negotiating the interest rate is low, medium, or high. All this information will prove very useful in step number 3, in which you're going to build your strategy that you will define which debt you focus on paying off first. Step number 3, order your debt from the most expensive to the cheapest. The third step is to put your debt in order, from the most expensive to the cheapest. What I mean by this is that you should prioritize paying off your debt with high monthly interest rates over those with low monthly interest rates. Now, be aware that here we're talking about the monthly interest of the debt, not the amount, the full amount of the debt itself. In other words, to work out which is the debt that is most expensive to pay off, you have to check which one has the highest monthly interest rate. Step number 4, negotiate minor interest rates with each lender. Next, with your detailed spreadsheet in hand, get in touch with each lender, each person, each company you owe money to, and try to negotiate with them. Firstly, follow up on the loan sharks with the most expensive debt that you owe. Move on into the next lender until you negotiate the debt with the lowest monthly interest rate. This is the time you have to recognize your financial mistakes and try to negotiate your debt. Explain your repayment plan. I'll show them the documents that you have prepared, and show them how much you can afford to pay each month. Depending on the case, most lenders agree to waiver the interest because they are at least making their money back finally that they initially loaned to you. You've already got the no. At the very least, you're going to be asking you to have a discount on your debt, and this will really help you in the long run. And after this round of negotiations, use your spreadsheet to calculate how much debt you have left, including the discounts that you might have managed to negotiate. Step number 5 is to update your outstanding balance and work out your average interest rate. The 5th step is to update your outstanding balance and make a weighted average of the interest rates on all your debt. Any spreadsheet program can calculate a weighted average. It is important to consider the weight of each debt in relation to the total amount that you owe. This information is essential for the next step, which is unifying your debt. Step number 6, unifying your debt. With the total debt that you owe after your discounts, now you're going to look for a bank that will offer you a loan for the full amount of your outstanding balance. You should pay particular attention to the interest of this loan and make sure it does not outweigh the weighted average of the interest of all your other loans. Ideally, the loan you take out will have the lowest interest rate possible. You could even ask your bank to buy out your debt out of you instead of you having to loan the money and then paying everything by yourself. Step number 7 is to pay off your debt by using your new loan. With the money that your bank has loaned you, you can pay all your lenders immediately. This will leave you with just one larger debt, the one that the bank loaned you. Although you still have the same outstanding balance, now you only have to worry about paying off one lender. As well as this, now you've swapped a handful of random debt for just one single, cheaper debt with lower interest rates. This is a very important step because in this process here, now we're getting to the core of the strategy. Here's the logic. It is better to exchange numerous debts with different types of creditors with different interest rates for one debt with one single lender and one average interest rate. Once you've understood this logic, now you're ready to move on to step number 8. Step number 8 is to negotiate the payment of the unified debt. The penultimate step of this strategy is to negotiate again. Now that you have unified that with the bank, you can negotiate smaller installments that fit the target percentage of your household budget better. If you receive a fixed salary every month, you can even get in touch with your bank and ask them to set up a standing order for a certain amount to be charged towards your debt repayment on the day that your salary gets paid. And this might all seem like a lot of work, but compared to paying different interest rates with different loans indefinitely, it is a walk in the park. This way you can stop worrying, have a bit of freedom, and stop wasting your time with multiple different lenders. Unifying your debt is not always worth the hassle. In some situations, unifying your debt is not worth the hassle. For example, unifying your debt might not be useful if you only owe debt to one lender, and their interest rates are lower than the ones that the bank would be offering you. Or if the interest rates offered by the bank are higher than the weighted average of all the interest rates from all your different current debts. If that's the case, what you can do, you can just unify the debt that is the most expensive to pay off, and then only borrow money to pay off this with lower interest rates. Meanwhile, you can just keep separate debt with low interest rates as they are. There is yet another exception to this step, which is when no bank will agree to lend you money for a lower interest rate than what you currently have with your current creditors. In any case, you should try to negotiate with your lenders and with your bank to get better, lower interest rates. If you can't unify your debt, you should focus on paying off the most expensive debt first. When the most expensive debt is paid off, you can move on to the next debt and so on until they're all paid off. Make sure that you've paid off the most expensive debt, not the ones that you've had the longest. For example, financing a car can be something that can last for many years, but it can have a lower interest rate than your credit card. Don't compromise your financial plan by paying off the car's longer debt while you're letting the more expensive credit card debt snowball. If you don't know how to do these calculations, please ask someone else who does. Look for people you can really trust. Avoid asking for help from people who might have a conflict of interest, such as loan sharks and lending companies or bank managers who have bank products to be selling you. Ideally, you should hire an independent accountant or a debt consultant. You could even ask a friend who understands more about saving than you do. Oh, that will help you a lot to get out of debt. Step number 9, during this whole process, make an effort to earn more and spend less. The last step, in all honesty, is the one that you should try to carry out throughout the whole process. Because the interest rates are always working against you, the quicker you pay off your debt, the better. And this means that the more money you make, the faster it will be for you to pay off your debt. If you need to, you could sell some of the things that you don't have any use for anymore. You can sell almost anything on the internet nowadays, from used clothes and electronic equipment, and gadgets and antique furniture. Another way to make extra money is to get another job, maybe as a freelancer. This way, you can also work outside of your current work schedule. Be creative. Try to think of new ways to make more money, as long as you don't end up taking on more debt, especially credit card debt. How to pay off credit card debt? Credit card interest rates are among the highest on the market. Apart from being a short-term solution, credit cards are a huge threat for people who don't know how to control their finances. The tip with credit cards is to use them to avoid making large purchases in installments. Instead, using them to pay off the whole amount monthly. If you want to use a credit card to get the benefits from free miles or points, you can look and set a payment scheme in which your debt is paid in full amount as a direct debit. In any case, you should always avoid paying a small initial price followed by installments. Is there anything such as good debt? You might have heard this, the rumor that there is good debt and there is bad debt. Good debt is often referred to the kind of debt that you can use to pay for long-term expenses such as buying a house, buying a car, maybe even open up a business. You should be very careful when you call this a good debt, because although some of these loans might indeed have low interest rates, it is important that you remember always to live by the rule of spending less than you earn. Don't sacrifice your financial freedom just to show off your social status by buying a luxury car. Don't do that. Save the money first, buy the goods later. As well as helping you to avoid the issue of paying interest, it will also help you to ensure that you truly want and need the thing that you're buying, or whether you're just buying something on impulse. Don't let yourself to fall victim to advertisements or payment plans. Now, here we go with the 9 steps to get out of debt. Let's quickly review the 9 steps to getting out of debt. Firstly, make a temporary adjustment to your budget and allocate the highest amount possible to paying off your debt. Secondly, list your debt in a spreadsheet, making sure to note how much you owe, who you owe it to, why you owe it, and most importantly, how much interest is there in each one of these debts that you owe. Thirdly, order your debt from the most expensive to the cheapest. By this I mean from the debt with the highest interest rates to the lowest. The 4th step is to negotiate with each lender and see how you can agree on a discount for each one of your interest rates. And the 5th step is to update your spreadsheet with the new old balance and calculate a weighted average of all the interest rates of your debt. Step number 6 is to ask your bank for a loan that will cover the full amount of your debt. And this new loan should have a lower interest rate than the weighted average of all the interest rates on all your current loans. Step number 7 is to use the money from your new loan and pay off your all individual debt, leaving you with just a cheaper unified debt. Step number 8 is to negotiate installments to pay off one large debt and set up a direct debit so they can pay off another piece of your debt every time you get your salary, every time you get paid. Step number 9 and final step is the one that you should really be doing the entire process. This step is to put into practice strategies that will help you to be earning more and spending less while you're off paying off your debt. The 9th step that I just showed you here in this conversation is a virtually foolproof strategy for solving your problems with debt. Your strategy now, your challenge is to be not taking new debt. In order to achieve this, you must change your relationship with money and adopt a mindset of financial abundance. I left the 9 steps written down so you can consult more easily by visiting arata.se/get out of debt, and you can enjoy. See you.